Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Social media companies are distracting people, sowing division, and preventing kids from experiencing normal childhoods. Those are the big takeaways of the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. That book is a big reason states and classrooms have been restricting social media and phone use. In Michigan, bills to restrict phone use and social media access for those under 18 are being considered. Schools have already taken action. Gibraltar, Dearborn, and Novi school districts have restricted phone use. In that last place, Novi, the superintendent of the school went so far as to give copies of the book, The Anxious Generation, to anyone who wanted it. About 1 year later, how has the book influenced Novi students? The Metro's Sam Corey spoke with Ben Mainka, superintendent of the Novi Community School District, to find out.
Why did you decide to pass out this book?
We had a lot of conversations in the district about some of the challenges we were facing, just with student attention, students' ability to do some of the things that we would say are more durable skills like communication and just having dialogue to collaborate with each other. And I had read some of Jonathan Haidt's work in the past, and so I picked up the book. I was actually heading out to a conference, read the book, couldn't put it down, and finished. And I said, this is a piece that every single person that works in our school district that works with kids needs to have in their possession.
And I mean, for context, you passed it out to everybody. I mean, not just teachers, but school aides, bus drivers, janitors. Like you gave it to everyone in the district who wanted it.
Correct.
Very briefly, I know it's a long book. What is the book about?
So The Anxious Generation, I would say, has two key takeaways. First, it's really about the rise of what I would call hyperactive or overparenting. If you think about the advent of removing adversity from children and basically saying, look, we need to do everything we can to create a safety culture. So Jonathan Haidt talks a lot about safety culture and how that's led to parents being very afraid to, say, not allow their children to play outside anymore, or fearful to travel on public transportation or engage in their local neighborhoods. And that has led to a very significant amount of restricting and giving kids a total lack of the typical growth that they would have, where they experience the challenges of growing up and navigating social situations. And so as adults, we've become increasingly involved in that part of our children's lives and almost like creating these cookie cutter little childhoods for kids versus when previously children grew up and they had to navigate the social dynamics of their groups, of their kids, how to play, what type of rules are we going to use to play this game, where are we going to play this game? And so as parents have become more and more concerned about safety, and parents have developed this kind of schema about, I can't let my kid experience life and the normal parts of growing up because we need to protect them, and how their brains have literally been rewired based on screens. The amount of screen time that they've had has contributed greatly to a lack of attention, and then a whole host of other social issues and anxiety and mental health concerns. And so when you pair these two things together, there are just these tremendous conversations that start to happen about what are we doing and what do we need to stop doing or start doing to kind of turn this tide around.
And so before you had read the book and passed the book out to anybody who would read it in the school district, Novi School District had already banned phones for middle schoolers and banned them during classroom time for high school students. Is that right?
Well, sort of. So we actually had no policy at our high school. Kids were using phones pretty ubiquitously. At our middle school, the expectation was that they were to be in their backpack. And then we've always had a policy, K-6, that they not have their cell phones. But once we read anxious generation, we said, you know what, we need to do something that's more formalized. And I'll tell you that there's enacted policies or procedures, and then there's the real policies and procedures that are actually happening. So by way of example, you might say, yes, they were supposed to be, but was that actually being forced with fidelity? Was that actually happening? And when people read this book and we had a system and a process that we implemented, everybody got on board, and it became a much higher rate of fidelity that we were implementing.
So, in other words, there was a big culture change. You had some policies on the books in terms of keeping phones out of students' hands, but not everybody had really bought into it to the same degree.
That's exactly right. And we also didn't have the tool. So in 5th through 8th grade, we invested in a tool called a Yonder pouch. The kids initially called them phone jails, which we thought was pretty funny. But the idea was they literally were putting their phone in a pouch, which is unable to then be accessed. But then there was always this question of, well, where is the phone going to be? I want my kid to have access to it, and so on and so forth. So the Yonder pouch allows for the child to have the phone on their person in their backpack, but it's actually not accessible. And then at the high school, what we said is, when they get to 9th grade, we have to start teaching them about appropriate use. I mean, they're going to be going into the workforce. They're going to have to learn how to navigate having a cell phone and also doing their work and being able to balance that. But we wanted to do that with kind of a graduated system. So what we did is at the high school, they are allowed to have their cell phones, and they can use their cell phones during passing time or during lunch, but they are to be placed in a classroom pouch at the front of the classroom during the instructional time. And they are not allowed to be accessible during the instructional time, which has tremendously improved the amount of engagement and the amount of time that kids are on task.
I think this gets to the question of how profound have the changes been since pretty much almost a year ago, you started passing out the book and people reading it and digesting it and working with it. It sounds like student attention is better. What are the kinds of things that you're seeing?
I would definitely highlight that one, but I would also say that when we started, there was some pushback from some parents. There was not a lot of pushback from teachers, although I think people were skeptical of, this is just one more thing we're going to do. We'll see, we'll wait and see. This year, a year into it, I can say, when I talk with teachers, they say, I've never seen such a radical change in the way that the kids are their attitudes are totally different, right? I mean, they're coming into classrooms and they're ready to talk, they're ready to engage, they're ready to think, they're ready to collaborate, and these are things that they know that's not like there's another choice to get on their cell phone or to get on to social media. It's actually going to not be available to them, so now they know, okay, well, now I can really engage this way, and they really, really like it. And it's interesting because the kids, even at the high school, will say, I didn't really like it at first, but I know how good it is for me. And so to hear kids having the maturity to be able to say that and then acknowledge that and then see those habits carrying out. And then there are some also tremendously other beneficial things that we've seen, such as cutting way back on some of the things that you see with cyberbullying and some of the things that you see with kids that are, thinking so much about a post that they have to like or how many likes are they getting. And the thing that's interesting is that all of their friends, they're subjected to the same situation. So it's not like they're missing out. There's this whole FOMO thing where, fear of missing out. If I'm not on my cell phone and I'm not checking that post, I'm missing out on the interactions and those other things. But then they realize, well, none of my friends are doing that either because their phones are also put away. And so now that kind of takes that anxiousness away and they can fully engage in their schoolwork and the tasks at hand.
How do you know these benefits are happening? Are teachers telling you them? Are students telling you them? Do you have reports of anxiousness, I guess, being down to be on the nose? Are, less people coming to the counselor's office to talk about the problems of social media? What are you seeing?
Students and student focus groups are telling us the benefits. The teachers are absolutely reporting the benefits on a regular basis. We have parents reporting the benefits. So we do quite a lot to work with communication with our different stakeholder groups. I personally meet with groups of students from each building, and they will have no problem telling you exactly what they think, and if they don't like something or they do like something. So we know from these focus groups that absolutely it is making a very positive negative and profound impact. In fact, usually things are kind of a mixed bag. You get some people that like it, some people that don't like it. This is almost universally positive with all of those stakeholder groups, which is unheard of, quite frankly. Now, in terms of other data that we're seeing a sharp decline in the amount of student discipline referrals that we saw. We're seeing a huge sharp decline in the number of referrals that we're seeing for like cyberbullying or harassment through social media. And that oftentimes led to secondary and tertiary behavior issues. You know, if you're frustrated about a post that somebody made and now that boils over and snowballs into other dynamics between different groups of kids, all of that stuff has been drastically reduced as a result of not having those things in place. And then just simply the understanding from the teachers that the students are engaging in collaborative work and they can get to those things where kids are discussing. And I think if you talk to employers now, they'll often say students don't know how to talk to adults, so they don't know how to engage in those ways. And I would just say that that is not what we're seeing, and removing the temptation of those devices all the time has made a big difference. I've tried to do that on my own, even in my own family. You know, when we go out to dinner and you look across you look across the table and you see a whole family eating dinner together and they're all on their phones. And so we've just kind of implemented a lot of those things personally. Like there's no cell phones at dinner. You know, we're going to talk, we're going to engage, we're going to do those things. And those are really, really critical. And as Haidt's work would suggest, that it's helping to build those important neural pathways in your brain that are going to help you be able to be successful in life later on as well.
You know, all this is happening after the pandemic, and that, of course, was a watershed moment. And it really profoundly impacted student learning, as I know you know well. How do you know some of the benefits that you're seeing are not related to that, to coming out of the pandemic and students coming back into the classroom?
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly think that the pandemic did have a profound impact, but what I would say is that these, what I would call negative rewirings of the brain, were happening well before the pandemic. And we saw these things occurring well before that. I think the pandemic exacerbated things, and they made some of the social emotional issues more pronounced. But I don't think that's an excuse anymore. And I don't want to suggest that I don't think the pandemic's still affecting us, because I think that it is. But screen time just went up during the pandemic, right? So we basically just pushed an accelerator on it. But what we know is that these things were happening well before the pandemic, and these effects that we were seeing were happening well before the pandemic. And so now what we can say pretty confidently is that the benefits that we're seeing are not just kids coming out of the pandemic, they're kids coming out of that haze that they were in when they were so addicted to being on their screens 24/7.
Ben Mainka is the Novi Public Schools superintendent. He was speaking with the Metro's Sam Corey. Metro on WDET. Coming up, we'll continue this conversation about how Novi Public Schools are giving students more agency to grow and learn by restricting social media use. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay with us. On WDET, I'm Robin Vincent. The Novi School District isn't just restricting phone use. It's trying to change its culture to enhance student attention and autonomy. Here's the rest of producer Sam Corey's conversation with Superintendent Ben Mainka about how they're making that shift.
Superintendent, I want to talk to you a little bit about your philosophy around technology and how to use it for learning. I know the Novi School District is not anti-tech. Y'all do have laptops or iPads sometimes in use in classrooms. What kind of philosophy, what's the ethic around technology that y'all use to enhance learning?
We consider ourselves to be very pro-technology. We are a one-to-one school district, so our students in first and second grade, kindergarten, have iPads. Starting in third grade, they get Chromebooks, and we replace those all the way through the time that they graduate from our high school. But I think that one of the things that we've really started to dig into is how much of the work that they do using technology requires those screens, right? And so there are some efficiencies. Helping kids understand the logistics of running in an online class and knowing how to do that, that's something that they're going to see when they go to college and university. There's many, many courses that are, even if they're in-person courses, they're executing kind of the learning management through technology and posting and submitting writing assignments, being able to view videos or have online chats and discussions. Those are all an important part of building a kid's skill and capacity to do that. I also think that artificial intelligence is something that we're really leaning into. We're really starting to think about how do we help kids generate generative AI proficiency and understand that that is going to be a required skill set for many employers. And so what we're doing is we're really leaning into those areas and saying, look, we are really pro-technology. And yet I should never walk into a classroom and see 25 students staring at a screen while there's no interaction going on, because those are the moments where we actually can be getting them to engage with each other and solve problems and give them complex, difficult problems that they might use technology to solve, but they have to do that together. And so we talk a lot about this concept of durable skills, meaning the skills that are going to endure even in the advent of technology and AI and robots and whatever is to come. Human beings are unique in that we have empathy and we understand perseverance and we know how to evaluate things and critically think and do all of the deep thinking work and metacognitive things that human beings do so well. And those are so important and actually going to become much more important than just knowledge acquisition, because quite frankly, that is what, a lot of artificial intelligence and other things are getting better and better and better at. What we need to be able to do is get better and better and better at these durable skills. And we can't do that if all we're doing is spending time on screens. We don't believe we're talking out of both sides of our mouths. What we're saying is technology is important. We're going to teach kids how to use those skills. We know that that's going to be a part of their lives, and they should be excellent at that. And they should also equally be excellent at being able to understand when and how to use the technology and also do that with other human beings in a setting where it's applicable.
How do you encourage students to have a balance around technology when they go home? I mean, they still have homework to do. They, are still hopefully encouraged to socialize and do stuff with their peers. Like, technology is quite addictive. Social media particularly is addictive. I mean, that's the platforms are trying to keep people longer and longer because that's how they make money. What is the healthy balance? And are there things that you're trying to do in the classroom that give students the tools to go home and to not be completely sucked into an internet vortex that's not helpful for their learning?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost, what I would say is that the school cannot do this alone, right? And I also don't think that parents can do this alone. And so it's going to require a partnership. And so we talk a lot. We have what's called parent camps, where we're offering training for parents around, how to handle some of this and how to partner with us in these ways. And I'll give you just a quick example. I had a parent that, was very supportive of our new program and how we have the pouches and all of that. But they said, I think it's just creating more of a problem at home because now they're home and they just want to spend all of the time making up for what they didn't get while they were at school on their device. And I just kind of had the pause, and I looked at her and I said, that would be a great opportunity for you to be able to engage your child in that discussion. And I handed her a copy of the book, and she said, I just started reading it, and I think I know what you're saying. And we kind of smirked at each other. And so the reality is, Yeah, what she was describing is exactly true. And so the parents have to then decide, are they going to pick this up? And are they going to say, you know what, video games by themselves are not bad, but we're going to put a limit on that. So after you've been on your video game for 45 minutes, you need to go outside. You need to do something else. We're going to start putting some limits on screen time. So, and Haidt gives some examples of that, and we talk a lot about that with our parents. But, after 2 hours of screen time, the research shows that, we start to have that rewiring effect.
The other thing I guess I want to go back to is the overprotectiveness that Jonathan Haidt writes about and that he sees as a problem from parents to students. I guess on this front, on student autonomy, I'm wondering what you've seen in terms of the benefits, because I know, a lot of parents are protective of their children. They want them to succeed. They want them, importantly, to be safe. And they want to be there for them and at least help them through problems, I think would be the generous take. They might say I don't necessarily want to be overprotective, but I do want to be protective and I do want to ensure they have a safe and healthy future. I guess where did, from your understanding, parents go a little too far on this front? And how have you seen, since, teachers and parents in your school district reading the book, that change student behavior?
I can give you a couple specific examples that we've done here in the district that we've seen just some tremendous impact. But I'll start by saying I think that you're correct. Everybody wants to make sure that their kids are safe. And I don't know anyone who's an educator or a parent that would say, I want children to be unsafe, or I don't want children to be protected, because that's part of our core, ethic as educators, as parents, is to make sure that our most vulnerable little human beings are protected and cared for. I think where we went wrong is the fundamental misunderstanding of how a plant grows or how any sort of living organism, right? So when you see trees, and there's all sorts of research about trees, and as they grow, when the wind is blowing, what happens, right? Their roots get stronger. When kids go out and run and play, their muscles get stronger. They can actually navigate walking and doing other things. This is a very simple and common thing that we all know. Yet for some reason, when it comes to experiencing adversity, and most of the times little kids experience adversity in pretty non-impactful ways, but we've chosen to blow them up and make them really, really big deals instead of using those as teachable moments to be able to talk with our kids about, hey, it sounds like that person said some things that were really not nice, right? How might we engage with that person next time, or what might we say to protect ourselves or stand up to that child? And using those kind of teachable moments has become less of the focus, and more of the focus now is on vilifying anyone who has said anything mean or done anything to potentially, what they will say is harmed my child, instead of using those moments to say, in reality, the growing up process is all about like bumps and scrapes and bruises and learning how to navigate these things. That's actually what makes us proficient as human beings and being in relationships and all of these other things that are going to happen later in life. And I would much prefer they experience that and learn how to work through that while we're there to guide them and coach them, than for them to be protected insanely from any sort of adversity, and then they leave the home and they go into the world and they just cannot cut it. They can't handle it. You're seeing, tremendous amounts of depression and mental health in these young adults that have had this experience. And so we want to do it in healthy ways. So, of course, I'm never going to say I want somebody to be unsafe, but let me give you a little bit of an example. We built a new playground at our 5th and 6th grade building, and the design of that playground was starting right at the time that we had read The Anxious Generation. And we said, you know what? We need to build a playground that, of course, we don't want anybody to be unsafe, but we do need to make it a little bit risky. We need to make the behavior like somewhat of an adventure park, because if we can make an adventure park, not only is that going to drive student excitement and engagement, we're also going to make it so that the adults aren't going to put a bunch of rules on the playground, because that's what schools typically like to do, and parents are like, okay, here are all the playground rules, and here's the way you're going to play the game, and here's the way that you're going to interact. impact. And what we did is we said, no, we're actually not going to do that. We're going to create these really kind of risky, engaging implements on our playground. And it's going to be understood that there's going to be some bumps and bruises and, a kid might scrape their knee and all of that other kind of stuff. And that's okay. But we're not going to overmanage the children's experience. We have had so many kids and parents come and say, I have totally lowered my shoulders, my blood pressure's down, my anxiousness is down, and my kids say that the best thing that they ever get to do at school is go on that playground. And that playground is, you can come and see it, is literally an adventure park for intermediate age kids. And we're starting to replicate that in other buildings. We're starting to have conversations about free play clubs after school where kids can just come together. It's a safe place in that there's people like adults around, but the adults are not close to the kids and they're not managing the play of the kids. The kids are navigating and negotiate that on their own. And we just haven't let kids do that for a very long time.
This is The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Sam Corey speaking with Ben Mainka, Superintendent of the Novi Community School District. We're discussing how his school district has been trying to increase the attention and autonomy of students in Novi Public Schools after he distributed The Anxious Generation, the book by Jonathan Haidt, to folks in the school district. One of the things that I'm hearing from you in this conversation, and it sounds like a takeaway from the book, is that parents themselves are often anxious. And they're anxious for a whole bunch of reasons, but the screens are part of that anxiety, and they are passing that anxiety down to their children. Is that a fair description? And then is what you're trying to do kind of trying to cut off that anxiety and liberate people a little bit more to develop healthy relationships with each other and to actually go out and learn?
Yes, it is exactly a great characterization of what I'm describing. And I will tell you that we're seeing a lot of younger parents who have little ones that are coming in, and they're actually really buying into this idea. And they're saying, you know what, we're not even going to have our devices out. I had talked to a dad the other day and he had a phone. And his phone, he called it a dumb phone. He actually ordered it on Amazon. It can't do anything except for text and make phone calls, has no apps. And he's like, we really want to go low tech. We're doing more like writing with paper in our house. We're doing more of those things to get our kids not hooked on these screens. And we're seeing that happen with our preschool kids, our kindergarten kids, and the adults, I think, are kind of buying in. They're like, yeah, we lived it. Like a lot of our parents that are having young kids come into our school system, they're products of that anxious generation. They're like, we could see what that did. And we don't want that for our kids. And so they see this as somewhat of an antidote or a solution to kind of go back to really focusing on the skills that we've been talking about.
Before letting you go, you referenced earlier in the conversation how you changed a little bit, your family going to dinner and your kids and everyone not being on their phones so much. I'm curious the other ways that reading this book and trying to encourage better attention and more autonomy has changed your life.
Changed my life in a big way. As a parent of 4 kids of my own, my wife and I have spent a lot of time talking about how we've raised our older children and then how we're raising ours that are still at home and younger now. And one of the things that I think is a big takeaway is really being intentional about allowing kids to struggle and also allowing the kids to do things on their own, right? So there's an application that has to be made to a job, or there's a form that has to be filled out for school. Well, mom and dad aren't filling those forms out anymore. It's your responsibility to get that filled out. If I'm going to sign something, I'll read what I'm going to sign and do a signature if it requires a parent signature, but you're going to actually do that work and putting more of that on them so that they can understand how to do kind of big person things. And that's made a huge impact on our kids' ability to kind of navigate and be more independent and understand, how they do things. And I have many, many friends and family and colleagues that are in similar situations, and they're saying similar things about how their kids they're starting to try and build that agency and autonomy in them. And I think the other thing is we don't want anybody to be unsafe. We have to be smart and not put our kids in any sort of situation where they could be, traumatically harmed. But outside of that, giving them healthy challenges and healthy risk-taking things, or maybe it's as simple as go ahead and ride your bike across town. And I think what it's done for me is recognize that I have to be able to create zones where I'm not on my phone. I'm not going to be doing that. And there's going to be times that I create for those moments where I need to engage with people. And so, I'm in the people business. All we do is really try and develop and grow people, whether that's adults or kids. And so I have to make sure that I'm not focused on my screen and my phone when I'm in a meeting. And so I've become very intentional about, putting things on silent, silencing phone calls and not taking a call or not texting or doing any sort of social messaging while I'm in a meeting. And it's making a difference in the way that I think people feel somewhat disrespectful if you're in a meeting and then someone starts to look at their phone while they're trying to talk to you. And so making people feel important and like that they are valued is a super important part of how that's changed me, because I'm recognizing it now. And I also know how I feel when I'm in those environments where that's happening to me as well.
Novi Schools Superintendent Ben Mainka speaking with the Metro's Sam Corey. Coming up, the legacy and future of Detroit's Packard plant. That's next on the Metro. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. We'll be right back after the news.